Alright, so this tutorial is going to go over using the Serpentine generator scripts, both in version 1, which will basically take the geometry and map it onto the two drive surfaces, and version 2, which will take essentially do the same thing but reconfigures the use of the bounding geometry. So you can have your tile expand outside of the bounding box that it's mapped to. Okay, so the first we have gone ahead and I've opened up my script editor. The command for that is monkey or edit script. So we can go ahead and get these guys open here, and I'll go ahead and just get them both open. These are downloadable from the website. So we get version 1 and version 2. And I've gone ahead and modeled some tiles here for ourselves, and you can see I've got layers set up here. So we have tile 1, and then we have set up for reveal for the next version of that. Then we have our surface drive wall. Now I've gone ahead and, if I turn on my building, modeled that into the interior model space of this guy here. So we can go ahead and turn that off so that way we can reduce the complexity. You can see the vantage points are still on here, and it's occupying the site condition that the bounding site we've set up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn those off now so that we can go ahead and get in there. So now we can see that we have our drive surface, and from here we're going to go ahead and we need to create the secondary drive surface. So I'm going to go ahead and offset that. And you can actually set this as a real distance now. You run it on account, and that's offset SRF. And you can see that each one of these arrows pops out, and that's directed towards the normal, or the normal of the surface, which is 90 degrees or perpendicular to the surface at that particular point. And so each one of those guys indicates where it's going to go. We can set a distance on that now. I'm going to go ahead and put, let's go 0.5 feet or 6 inches. And you can see that updated in there. We do not want solid because we want to keep these as separate surfaces. And otherwise everything else should be on. We don't want both sides either. If you decide you want to go the opposite direction, you can hit flip and it'll flip the direction. But otherwise we should be good to go. You can hit enter and we can go ahead and take a look at this. Now this is pretty good actually. What we don't have any situations where the surface that resulted from that is turning in on itself. So we should be able to essentially generate the geometries from these two guys. And you'll note that I have this in ghosted view for this. Now I'm going to go ahead and select both of these, and I'm going to rebuild them. Select both these surfaces, and I'm going to go ahead and rebuild them. And it's going to give me some options here, and I'm just going to go ahead and rebuild them 10 by 10. And that should make them relatively similar. This is essentially doing what the script is going to do, and we can do another check and make sure we don't have any problems or issues with that. Okay, and so this is looking pretty good. You can see I've sort of designed areas where we're going to get a little bit more transparency up as this thing starts to pick up and set itself down. Alright, if we go over here, you can see the tiles here. We have the poly surface and surfaces, a collection of these guys. For 3D printing, we're going to keep these guys separate. For this, we'll mesh it, and then we can create, join those meshes. So if we come out here, we can type this, and we'll mesh this. And I'll make a really sort of a little bit more rudimentary mesh than the one I'm using. And then I'm just going to lock that object. And I can pull the mesh away. So each one of these guys you can say is one mesh object. And so where each one of these guys is a whole series of these things. It looks like I have some duplicates in here. We can come in and type this and just type join. And this is a relatively clunky way of doing this, but this gives us the geometry, so for rendering purposes we can map that onto there. You'll note that there's no scalar relationship with this because we're going to start to define that by the bounding box of the geometry, so it's going to proportion that accordingly. Alright, so at this point we're basically ready to run our script, so let's go ahead and do a quick check. We got our two drive surfaces and our geometry, so we can go ahead and pull up the script editor. And we can go ahead and hit run, and it's going to prompt us for what we want to do with this. Now it's important that you guys make sure that you get into a view where you can see each one of these surfaces distinctly, because if you can select the same drive surface for both the front and the back, and it makes your geometry infinitely thin, which is obviously not going to visualize anything properly or work functionally. So we'll go ahead and select the first one, and we'll go ahead and select the second one. And then it's going to ask us for the map object, and we'll go ahead and just grab that mesh that we just generated by joining. And now it's going to ask us for essentially the tiling, how many directions in the U and how many in the V. And so if we think about this, the U is one direction and the V is the other, as if this is a Cartesian coordinate system, thinking that this is the X and this is the Y. And so we can start to really get into the mechanism here. And so we can decide how many tiles we want. So we'll go, I'm going to say 10, we'll say 15 by 10. So now this is going to generate a tile and mapping the space between each one of those guys. Now if you have the nice thing about this is you guys can run, once you've done that, run the analysis script and reprogram this. You can, instead of having to remodel your tile, you can change the tiling effects on there for each one of these guys. So I'll go ahead and just hide these guys. And then I'll take that curve here and also hide that. Let's just do a select curve here and hide those. So now you can see that we have our guy. And each one of these guys, because what it did is, and I'll show you the command for this, it took and analyzed the bounding box of this geometry. And so when I type bounding box, that's actually a command. So I can pull the bounding box out of this geometry. And what that does is that says all of the edges that this touched, define all the planes in a six-sided box. So if you were going to be shipping this across the country, this is the smallest possible box that this could fit in if we were defining it by x and y coordinates, x, y, z coordinates. Okay? And so we can take that, and that's exactly what's getting mapped into each one of these guys. So our connection points are essentially where these tips come and mount over. So if I take this, and it's building this script in this way. So each one of these guys is, I'll just do a quick setup for here, give you a sense about what this is doing. So it's placing those geometries along the surface in this way, and then we can come in and it's essentially not building those geometries. This is how all of our connection details are actually working in the script. Okay? So go ahead and delete those away. And so that's how you guys are going to run this first version of the script. So that's how, and if I undo that, this is how you guys need to start to think about how your connection details are actually going to work. So you're designing this one object, and you can start to see that these things are touching and connecting, and we're going to be able to get some other nicer visualization. We're going to see the patterns start to emerge out of that. Okay. All right. So now we're ready to run version 2 of this script. So I've gone ahead and I'm going to go ahead and turn off these guys. And I'll go ahead and unhide my, or sorry, show my drive surfaces again. So at least we're right back here. And this is, I was working on the wrong layer for some of this, so I should, making sure you manage your layers properly is always a pretty key thing. So make sure this is put on my surface wall. So then when I turn this off, I have 2 drive surfaces and my geometry, and you'll note that there's now an additional box. So what I've done here is, the next version of the script is going to ask me for a new bounding box. So instead of using the geometry that I've used to define here, I can say I want the bounding box to be slightly smaller. And what that will enable it to do is each tile will then be able to reach outside of the bounding area so that we can actually have these things extend and connect, similar to the Greg-Lynn blob wall. So I'll go ahead and pull this back up again, and we'll go run version 2. So we'll select these guys. 1 and then 2. It's going to ask me to get the map object. Make sure that you guys are able to do this. If you accidentally select the bounding box, that's bad. And these two things are relative to each other, so you can't have the bounding box floating off in 3D space. They need to be related. Okay, so we'll get this guy, and then it's going to ask us for the bounding geometry. Okay, and then we can, again, we'll just stick to our guns here, 15 by 10. And now it's building this. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this so we can turn off the redraw. You guys can see this is the package of materials that's available online, and I'm working in the building space model. So, alright, and we saw this pop back up, so that's a good sign. Make this bigger. And wait for our redraw to come back. Okay, and so then we have this has appeared now, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this on to just a shaded viewport so I can make this a little bit lighter on the machine so it doesn't have to see through all this. So you'll note that this is, because this is a much heavier mesh, this is the denser version. My computer is now running much slower, so you know, think about that when you guys are setting up your mesh details. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. So we'll turn off the surfaces here. You can see that now we have a much denser wall out of this. I'll go ahead and just zoom in there. Let's see if I... There you go. Now you can see how these things are starting to overlap based on that new bounding box. These things are starting to sort of bulge into each other. Okay. So now we're essentially, you guys can start to guess and check this. This is obviously not going to be within our transparency threshold for the assignment, but we can go ahead and analyze that. I'm just going to move this away. So you guys can save and version each of these things as you go across it and go through it, so that we can start to iterate and show diagrams of how you guys are starting to develop that. And as you guys start to have trouble manipulating this and going through the analysis of this, we can start to change the drive surface or the tiling without really having to do too much of an overhaul of our geometry. Okay? All right, and that's it. Do not forget to save and save often as you guys are going through this.